and it's quite amazing. I've driven past here so many times, but in the short time that I've been here today, it's just been overwhelmed. It seems like such a wonderful school. So thank you to all of you for inviting me. The topic that I've chosen today is called the Tightrope of Teaching, Keeping One's Balance in a Windy World. And I was very nervous about the title because I thought, well, this would sound a little bit too much like poetry, but let's see how it goes. But, you know, I didn't realize the significance of that title when I sat down on the 9th of July in 2024 to start preparing the speech. I didn't realize the significance of the title because I don't know if that day means anything to you, the 9th of July. It was the first day of term, the wind was howling outside, the rain was pelting down, and I felt absolutely desperate for the children who were making their way to school, not to mention the teachers. And I thought keeping one's balance in a windy world had been meant as a metaphor, and suddenly it became really very real. But you might ask, why that metaphor? What is it about a tightrope and a windy world that reminds me of being a teacher? And does this metaphor have positive or negative connotations? To put it mildly, do I think that teachers on a tightrope are going to tumble down, or are they going to keep their balance? Will they make it safely to the other side? And equally important, what is the other side? What is their destination as they make their way on the tightrope? So I'm going to share a few thoughts with you on those topics. First of all, I want to say something about the windy world. Now, the metaphor of wind is not new. It's been used many times over history, I suppose. And an example that I think many of you would be familiar with is from our own African history, is from Harold Macmillan, who was then the Prime Minister of Great Britain at the time, when he spoke to the Parliament of South Africa in 1960, and he spoke about the winds of change. And by that was meant the end of colonialism, of British colonial rule in Africa. Now, 60 years later, it's very hard to imagine colonial rule as it was then, but its influence remains in many ways. But today we have so many other winds of change. Our learners face massive developments in technology, deep concerns about climate change and sustainability of the planet, and persistent calls for transformation and decolonization. These are big challenges that might overwhelm us in the day-to-day busyness of lesson preparation, teaching, and assessment. It's hard to think about those big topics when one is doing the day-to-day work of teaching. But closer to home, we're also buffeted by new gusts of wind. I don't need to talk to you about the introduction of online learning, or remote teaching and learning, or hybrid learning, or blended learning, or augmented learning, or digital learning, or whatever you want to call it. Not to mention the creeping influence of artificial intelligence, which creates a whole new scenario for teaching and learning. How will learners learn to think if it can all be done artificially? Do they even need to learn to think? These are some of the questions thrown up by AI. So this tightrope requires a major rethink of teaching, of learning, and of assessment. And whether we fail, or whether we maintain our balance, we really don't know yet. We're there. I want to say a little bit about the expectations of teachers. So many expectations are placed on teachers. Whenever an issue arises, from road safety to sex education, not to mention robotics or jolly phonics, people say we must add it to the school curriculum. But there are only so many hours in a day. So another gust of wind relates to policy structures, policy proposals. What should be in the school curriculum, and what should be left to other stakeholders in society? I always fear that people think that teachers should be doing it all. I mean, even the video which says you are the this and you are the that, it's one heck of a responsibility. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with South African policies on teacher education. All of you, I would think, have either a diploma or a BEd or BGC or some kind of qualification. So when our students come into university and have to learn to be teachers, there's a lot that they're expected to do. But if you actually look at the policy on teacher education, it's very sobering to actually read what are they expected to know and do at the end of 4 years. So some years ago, and I just thought I'd share with you, some years ago, there were 7 roles for the educator. I'm not sure if you're familiar with these. This was what the policy said. 7 roles for the teacher that all teachers should be able to do. Learning mediator, interpreter and designer of learning programs and materials, leader, administrator and manager, scholar, researcher and lifelong learner, community, citizenship and pastoral role, assessor, and then last, I don't know why it comes last, learning area, subject, discipline, phase specialist. So later on, it became obvious that not one person can do all of this. So now it does not exist. But against all of this remains the enduring values of education that I believe brought all of us into the profession, that we still hold dearly, and that we hope will persist within these gusts of change, within this changing environment. Because whatever challenges we face, the aspirations of peace, of care, of respect for others, of a love for knowledge, a joy in our subject, an open mind, the pleasure of reading, and the capability to write, these cannot be swept away in the gusts of time. So this brings me to the first question that I'd like to put to you. Is it this one? Yeah. Thinking of everything that remains the same and everything that changes, I would like to put this question to you. And, you know, it's not about having a discussion now. I don't think we're going to be able to do that. I think let's keep it as a personal moment of thought. This question, what should we as teachers hold on to and why? What should we as teachers be doing differently and why? So I'm just going to give you about a few seconds to think about that. Okay. So I want to move now on to the question of the destination. Don't forget that tightrope walker who's making her way across. The tightrope athlete can see a little platform at the end of her journey. She knows exactly where she's heading, and she hopes she gets there in one piece. But for teachers, it's different. There are clear short-term goals. For example, that learners will pass the test, they'll pass the subject, they'll pass the grade, they'll pass the phase. But how does this relate to the further destination, a broader vision of education? Now, some of you might be familiar with this writer, Michael Fullan, because he's quite a well-known author on educational change. Michael Fullan, F-U-L-L-A-N. Michael Fullan. He's a well-known researcher on educational reform, and he has identified 8 lessons of sustainable change, especially for leadership. And there's one that I like very much, and it says, it's called a dual commitment to short-term and long-term change. Results. A dual commitment to short-term and long-term results. So I find this very helpful in thinking about an intended destination. For what teachers do on a daily basis has both short-term and long-term implications and purposes. Teaching children how to read, for example, goes far beyond being able to understand and appreciate words and sentences on a page. It's setting the scene for a literate citizenry that can gather information, consider points of view, and make sense of an argument. Teaching children to work together lays the building blocks for the skill of listening towards democratic engagement. These are the long-term destinations that perhaps in doing the short-term work, one is not even aware exist, but they reside within the power of teachers. My sister-in-law, keep it in the family, is the principal of a high school in a very challenging area of Cape Town. So in preparation for this talk, I asked her what she thought was the most important goal or destination for teachers. And her immediate response was self-sufficiency of the learners. And she immediately followed this with, and that is what we are not doing. So this led me to wonder how our school curriculum promotes or hinders something like self-sufficiency, which is surely both a short-term goal and a long-term goal. I'm sure that people here would have views on this, and maybe there'll be a discussion about that. So I want to now talk to the issue of the journey. So as I mentioned, my sister-in-law referred to self-sufficiency on the part of learners. But this made me wonder, is self-sufficiency something that refers to teachers as well? Do teachers have the time, the energy, the support, the motivation to be self-driven? What does professional responsibility really look like for each individual and for the school as a whole? What in the school environment promotes opportunities for self-sufficiency or professional responsibility? What closes down such opportunities? A key word that I use a lot, have used with the students, is that of agency. Agency, I always ask the students what comes to mind when I say agency, and then they say travel. They're not travel agency. So you have to realize people have different understandings. But anyway, what am I talking about? The word encompasses such qualities as the will and capacity to make choices, to take principled action, and to enact change. But agency is not free-floating. We are not just there. It takes place in a context that either supports or constrains that agency, whether that context be the CAPS curriculum, the school rules, the atmosphere at the school, or the resources. There are many aspects of our context that might promote or constrain agency. And I'm sure they come to mind immediately as I'm talking. So for a few years, I taught, or I still am, teaching an honors course called Curriculum Change. For their research project, students explore the route to agency for teachers in different situations. Specifically, they ask these teachers about their past histories, their present circumstances, and their short-term and long-term goals. And in combination, these three aspects, past, present, and future, contribute to the sense of agency, how teachers see themselves in the profession. So I want to show you the model of agency that we work with, because I think it can generate some thinking for everyone. I'm not going to go through all this, don't worry. But what this slide is, it's a model of agency that shows how who one is in this world as an agent is a function of one's past, one's present, and one's future. So the past is your own training, your own personal history, your own biography, your own professional training. Your present is your context, the culture at the school, the structures, the environment, the resources, everything. The future is your short-term goals, your long-term goals. In combination, these aspects of your past, your present, future bring yourself together, if I can call it that. So here's a little exercise for you. What aspects, something for you to think about, what aspects of my personal history inform my work as a teacher? That's your past. What aspects of my day-to-day work do I find most motivating? That's your present. How do my teaching methods link to my long-term goals for my learners? That's your future. So there's a moment to ponder on those questions. All right, so now just a few words about that balancing act. So I want to refer again to that balancing act of teaching. Most tightrope walkers carry a long rod to stop themselves from falling. What is your rod, and why do you hold it? We all know that teaching is an occupation laden with emotion. The highs, the lows, the days that are filled with joy, the days that you wish you could just stay in bed, you can't face going to school. And scholars have written about this emotion, and they refer to it, one of the aspects of emotion that they refer to is vulnerability. They say vulnerability is a structural condition of teaching. In other words, it's built into the job. It's not something you can avoid, it's there. Because there's pressure from parents, there's pressure from learners, there's pressure from society, there's pressure from exams, there's pressure from everywhere. And the teacher is the vulnerable one in the middle trying to carry it all. And all of that can buffet that person who's trying to stay balanced. And the responsibility is immense. For example, I read, in the Mail and Guardian recently an article, and they said this about teaching. Education has a transformative capacity to drive positive change, ultimately propelling progress towards a sustainable and equitable global society. And I thought, oh, that's a lot to ask, a big task. So here's my last question. What is your support? What is your rod in that balancing act, in that journey of being a teacher? So it's something to think about for a minute. Okay. Now, coming to the end, there are many metaphors that illustrate the world of a teacher. I refer to a tightrope and a windy world, but there are of course many others. And I once asked student teachers to bring an object to class, it was a workshop, that illustrated the life of a teacher. So I'm just going to share one with you because I thought it was really nice. It spoke to me. It's a circuit. She brought a circuit, what do you call this? Circuit something. And why I like it, because in that circuit, all aspects of the school are interconnected. And if one aspect breaks down, the whole system suffers. And I just think that was very evocative. All right. So finally, someone once criticized me in a presentation. This person was an engineer, by the way. I know that's why they criticized me, but anyway. They criticized me in the presentation for asking too many questions and giving too few answers. You can see why I was an engineer. He said I asked too many questions and I gave too few answers. So some of you may feel the same way, and if you do, I apologize. Perhaps you had hoped for more practical advice on what we face in education. But I think you get that all the time. I'm not wise enough or experienced enough to really go into all of that. And there are others who will do a better job. So my feeling is that if we hold on to values such as dialogue between ourselves, the ability to listen to others, including to the learners, a critical approach to the curriculum, a love for learning, accountability to the high standards of the profession, concern for the society around us and beyond us, if we hold on to all of that, we stand a chance of balancing in this windy world of teaching. Thank you.
I'm sure that you found that as insightful as I did, and just, I think just that acknowledgement of really what we do face as teachers in schools and just all the pressure, I think, and on a Friday afternoon, I think we all feel that pressure, we just want to, but what we're going to do right now is just take a little bit of time to reflect. And so I know we're all sitting in rows and probably sitting with people that you know. Perhaps just take a bit of time in small groups of maybe 4 or 5 where you're sitting, or you can just turn your chairs if you need to, but just to chat about some of the questions and some of the things that came up in this talk that you can reflect on with each other. And we'll give about maybe 10 minutes or so for that, and then we'll bring it back. So you can just move your chairs in whichever way you'd like to do that. Thank you.
Sorry, it's fine, don't worry.